be a very challenging issue for business around the world. But under adaptability, people ask the questions whether it is proactive or it's passive.
That's a great question, and I think maybe to address it, it's important to start with the context for why this matters more, because one could say adaptiveness has always been a good trait. So why now?
Yeah, why now is so important.
Versus 20 years ago or something. Actually, in the data, is that the classic ways that companies built competitive advantage were through things like scale and positional strength. And that those elements, and you see it in the data, for many years, if you were a strong company to begin with, the odds that you'd be a strong company 5 or 10 or 15 years later were pretty high. And then what we've observed over the last 20 years or so is that that relative value of the position that you occupy is worth less and less. That in fact, the past success is less and less a foundation for future success. What matters more is not what position you had, but what you did with the position that you had. And therefore the ability to change, to continue to evolve, takes on a greater role in being advantaged in the future than simply, well, I'm the leader in the industry. And we see that for a number of reasons, but in particular, the rate of change of technology and the speed with which technology is not just evolving because Moore's law has been in place 50 years plus. It's not just the rate of technology, but it's also globalization. It's the degree to which the technology plus business models have allowed fragmenting of traditional value chains. And so if you put all of those things together, the way to win is to be able to evolve and to evolve faster than competitors in a challenging landscape. Which brings me to your question, which is, so is it about adaptiveness strictly in a reactive sense, or how does one be proactive? And we would say the mindset of someone who wins on adaptiveness is the last thing to do is wait till one of your main competitors has already done it and then try to copy it. It's to try to be ahead. So how do you get ahead?
What you are saying seems to me you destroy two basic concepts in strategic management. The first one is we talk about sustainable competitive advantages. From what you are saying is there's no such thing. No competitive advantage could be sustainable. The second thing is we believe it used to be core competencies. And as a result, I build my core competency, but the world has changed. My core competency becomes core rigidity. And then, oops, we all fall into victims of two big ideas in strategic management. You think there's no
the way you stated it would be stronger than I would. It's actually exactly the right question, though, that leading companies should be asking themselves. And then second, as one thinks about strategy, to recognize the difference in starting position as the definer of strategy. I would say, of course, there's advantage to scale and to brand and to technologies that are advantaged, of course. But the challenge is that the rate of change is higher than people often perceive it to be. Big companies are particularly at risk at underestimating the rate of change because they're successful, because they're winning and they're at the top. And so the question is, how do you understand that the world is changing and find ways to experiment and leverage the fact that you have scale, leverage the fact that you have customer access that others don't have, leverage the fact that business partners want to work with you because if they work with you, they get access to much bigger markets, and force that. And then second, as one thinks about strategy, to recognize the difference in starting position as the definer of strategy. I think that oftentimes we have found companies think that there's one strategic playbook that you bring to every kind of business situation you encounter. It's sort of the business school, you look at you do these 5 steps and you run it through this recipe book and out pops the answer. But in fact, that's not the reality. That just to use an example, we've done all this work on how do you find growth? How do you find value creating growth? It's easy to find growth. You can buy growth that creates no value. You can destroy value. But how do you find value creating growth? And when we've looked at the companies that succeeded as breakout growers relative to their peer set, we found that it was very different on the way they approached it was very different based on two axes. One was, what was the level of volatility in that industry? Was that industry really volatile? Was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of change happening? Or was it a relatively stable industry? And second, what was their relative position at the start? Were they relatively strong at the start and advantage? They had a relative price premium, either in the form of higher gross margin or other ways to look at value creation, or were they a disadvantaged player? And that in fact, how you view it, those starting points make an enormous difference.
So, given that, do you still believe in such thing called core competency? Should we build and commit a lot of resources to build core competencies? Because you never know, 5 or 10 years from now, your core competencies will no longer be needed. Like a Kodak.
I would say passionately, I believe in core competencies, provided that the competency is viewed as the starting point to continue to evolve and learn.
Right.
That's the issue. So Walmart's got an unbelievable logistics system. How can you not look at what Walmart's doing and not view that that core competency has been critical to massive value creation, tens and tens of billions of dollars of value creation over decades?
Yes.
But the world is moving very fast in logistics, and Amazon is innovating with very new models and robotics picking systems and talking about drones in people's homes and all these things. Now, will they all work? Of course not. Some will work, some won't. But if you're Walmart, the risk is not, was logistics a core competency? The risk is that because logistics is such a core competency, you think you have it figured out, and you lose the mindset of experimentation and pushing the boundaries and partnering with non-conventional players to try new things and looking for the mavericks, not by the time Amazon has made the announcement, but before. That's the challenge that leading players have to fight against.
Yeah, so that's another interesting question is, as a retailer, so-called brick and mortar retailer, how could they deal with e-tailer? We haven't seen many good examples. They all fail in their e-commerce business initiatives.
Well, the game isn't over yet. So first, I mean, we're in an early stage of a game. And actually, if you look at the returns of a CVS or a Walmart, some of the others relative to the returns that Amazon's generated, it would be, Amazon's gotten tremendous growth, but it would be hard to declare them the complete victor. I mean, a lot of traditional retailers have done quite well. I think that the real question that everybody is working toward is what's the right balance of physical, offline, bricks and mortar sorts of capabilities and
combining with online.
And that omni-channel is going to be a huge strategic question for many companies with no one single answer. Obviously, if you're Amazon starting point with such a remarkable online capability, you're not going to likely put up stores and physical infrastructure in that way. You're going to do it through warehouses and one-day delivery systems and all the rest. But if you're Walmart and you have this amazing footprint and you cover so much of the US, then you can think about what omni-channel means in a different way and offer online, but integrate it with your store experience. We've seen that in a range of different channels. And so I think that the battleground in the years ahead will be who can sort out omni-channel and who can find the right way from a customer point of view to create the right kinds of experiences with the ability to order online and get rapid delivery, to leverage store infrastructures where they exist, to have experiences, and that it will vary a lot by market.
We recognize that adaptability will be a competitive advantage in the future, but for many companies, they told me, well, I cannot adapt. First, the second, they are already in a low growth and stagnant industry. Yes. They want to transform, okay, but they don't know where to go because their industry may be dying. Their industry is declining, may be replaced by manufacturers from somewhere else. So they're wondering a couple of questions. First, should I transform or not? If I transform, where to go? If I do not transform, I just waiting to die. But if I transform, I may die sooner because I go new business areas. That's going to be a very strange to me, and the chance of success is pretty low. So the problem is for those companies who could not have adapted now, what should they do? How to transform?
It's a very good question, and in fact, it's probably one of the hardest questions in today's business world, because the underlying great rates of growth in many sectors have come down.
Yes.
As economic growth has come down, as the emerging markets, which will still outperform the developed markets by a lot, still are at lower growth rates than they were a few years ago. And I would go back to where we started, which is, I think, the starting point of your position.
The starting point of your position.
Matters a huge amount. So I'd make two observations. The first is that if you look within sectors versus across sectors, the underlying differences in growth rates within a sector are multiples versus the differences on average across sectors. So in almost every industry, and I'm not talking about among tiny entrepreneurs, among substantial players, Fortune 2000 players, you find very substantial differences in growth rates. So I think to sort of say, well, my sector is not doing very well, so my destiny is low growth, is to abdicate the role of management, to be figuring out how to build advantage, not just when it's easy, but when it's not easy, as it is in many parts of today's world. And the second thing is, then you have to say, so where am I really as I start this journey? So for example, what we found in looking at the breakout growers, the people that have outperformed, if you're in a relatively stable industry and you're a really strong position to start, take P&G and consumer products is a classic example that people have heard of, but you find many other leading companies in different sectors. Oftentimes, the best paths to growth is not to try radically new things and say, well, I've got to find growth, I've got to go way afar. It's to go for near-in adjacencies. Near-in adjacencies. So look at the things you do really well and where can you go close by, you know, Swiffers for P&G or whatever, things that leverage your core capabilities. Or it's to go just one step away, trying some experiments that are in spaces that are not so far from your core. And to have relatively less and bold experiments that are in a totally different place. Not zero, but doing that. And so we would say, to put numbers around it, if you're strong in your existing business and your existing business is pretty stable, about 60% of your growth comes from maximizing the core, the things you're already in, serve your customers better, take share, build. About 30% comes from near-in adjacencies, things close by, and 10% comes from experiments that are further afield, exploring new frontiers. On the other hand, if you're in a business where it's much more volatile and the markets are much more uncertain, it almost doesn't matter whether your starting position is strong or weak because the world is changing around you. Then being much more experimental, trying more different things, being much faster to spot the data in the environment, test new ideas and push and learn becomes critical to success, because the odds of just thinking, well, the world's changing all around us, we'll just keep doing what we're doing and it's fine, that doesn't cut it. And I think that's why we with our clients, often the first thing we're doing is sort of saying, where are we really? What's the reality of the world we live in? And what's the reality of where we really stand? And using that as the platform to grow as for us, the key element to start that journey.